All right, group. So this is our first set of notes for anatomy and physiology. This is going to cover kind of a little bit of the history, and then what we will come to know as structure and function, which is the anatomy and physiology portion of the class. All right. So just a little background on the history of anatomy and physiology, and kind of where this started taking place. Um, early. So this is like dawn of really anatomy, which would have been around the 1200s. Students of anatomy and physiology were probably looking for a way to treat illness and injuries. So somebody comes in with a stomach ache and, none of the usual treatments are working. Um, they would open up the body to see what they could find. So prior to really the form or the formation of anatomy and physiology, there were early healers, and so these would have been people that relied on superstitions and magics and herbs and things like that were found in nature to treat certain ailments, even if that ailment could not be treated by that natural um, fix. So not saying that things that are natural don't help, but like if somebody came in and they had what we know as today cancer, well, they would just give them like, okay, take this particular herb and mix it with your tea and it should help. Um, so when anatomy and physiology first started being studied, typically the students and the people who were learning it, the scientists, they would dissect cadavers. So people who had passed away, they would open them up and see what they could find. And so in doing this, this made it so that people who were studying anatomy and physiology started to develop techniques that made it so that things were consistent, and with that it made it so that there became a standard practice when it came to like surgeries and opening people up, whether those people were dead or alive. With that as well, because anatomy and physiology was housed during a time when the like Latin language was very prominent. Greek and Latin roots are very important to anatomy and physiology because it helps keep the language the same all throughout the world. So when we're talking about, like, for example, you go to another country and you say, hey, my gastro or my calf muscle, they might look at you like, what? But if you say gastrocnemius, which is the official name for the calf muscle, then it kind of it gives that sense of common language among people who are studying the same thing. On top of that as well, scientific method has been very important for anatomy and physiology, just to get this is what we've done, this is what we were trying to do. Either yes, it worked, now you try it, or no, this did not work. What other ideas do we have? So that is true for how the body works in and of itself. That's true for, hey, if we give this person this medicine, what does this do to them? This person comes in with this ailment. How can we fix it? So, scientific method, even though anatomy and physiology seems a lot more, I guess, discovered, we're still learning new things and finding new information on the body, even today, even though we've been studying it for officially been studying it for about 900 years. So, one of the first, what is known as an anatomist, so somebody who studies anatomy, was Vesalius. And right around 1543, he started actually drawing his cadavers, and he was very meticulous with his scalpel in that he would use cadavers and he would kind of pinpoint a certain area that he wanted to focus on, and he would meticulously take away anything that was not part of that particular system or that part of the body. So here are a few of his images. So we have like the opening of the brain, and you can see he was very meticulous in the removal of the skin and the removal of the scalp, or the cranium. And then he was also meticulous with the removal of the membrane, the meninges that cover the brain. And he also sliced into it and kind of drew what he saw. He'd also do this with muscles. He would meticulously remove the skin, and then he would draw very detailed what exactly it was that he could see. Another example of this is this picture here on our slides. Trying to get rid of this. There we go. This is another one of his images. So again, he was very meticulous, very time consuming. You can also imagine the smell with that because that's not something that happens in a few hours. So kind of put yourself in Vesalius's shoes. He would have to have a cadaver out for a really long time in the Italian heat because he was Italian. So pretty gross smell, I can imagine. But um, all right, so when we talk about anatomy and physiology, so we're taking anat and phys or A and P, however you want to call it. It is really two separate parts. Anatomy is the structure or the morphology and the parts. I think of this as like the memorization part of the class. So there is going to be a lot of memorization, but this is also like the what it is. What is it made out of? Things like that. So it's the memorization and what it is. Physiology is the function of the parts. So how does everything work together? Why does it work together? Um, so yeah, anatomy is the memorization. Can you look at this picture and tell me where the heart is? Can you tell me where the lungs are? Can you tell me where the brain would be? And then the physiology is, okay, how does the impact of the heart not working properly? How does that impact the lungs? If the lungs aren't working properly, how does that impact the brain? So it's the interactions. These disciplines are closely related, but they are not the exact same thing. So it is going to be important that in this class, you don't just memorize, but you also know how these things are working. So we talked about that word anatomist. So an anatomist is more or less really focused on observation and dissection, whereas physiologists, they are experimentation. If we give a living person this, how does that impact their body? So physiology, we are constantly discovering new things about physiology, um, simply because there's so many workings to the body that we still don't understand. Like we still really don't fully understand like the nervous system. So there's still stuff coming out. And then also on top of that, physiologists are usually going to be the ones in, disease control, disease prevention, um, virology, things like that, where it's like what makes a person sick. So when you have a new illness, so like when COVID-19 started happening and we started seeing, okay, these people got COVID, this is how it's impacting them. That's a lot of physiology. So anatomy doesn't get as many new discoveries, but that's because we've been looking at the body for 900 years and documenting. So it is harder to discover something new, but it does still happen. So if we look at the anatomy versus physiology of, say, a pencil, so kind of break it down a little bit more basic. When we talk about the anatomy, we're going to be talking about what it is. What is it made out of? Okay. So when we look at the pencil, we could say that it's wooden, has a pink rubbery part on the top, has a graphite tip. So this is all the anatomy of the pencil. So again, what it's made out of. The physiology is how it works. So the wooden part that provides a nice structure. You don't want your pencil to be too wide. You don't want it to be too narrow. You want it to be able to fit between your fingers just nicely. The pink rubbery part is used for erasing. So when the friction of the pink rubbery part, the eraser comes into contact with the graphite, it removes the graphite from the paper. And then the graphite tip is used for writing. When you scratch the graphite tip along paper, whatever it is that you're writing on, that friction will pull the graphite off and make it stick to the paper. So that is kind of the basics behind anatomy and physiology. Anatomy, what is it? Physiology, how does it work? Why does it work? Why is it important? All right. The really big thing to remember here is that structure leads to function. What the thing is made out of, why it's made is going, or excuse me, yeah, what it's made out of, um, and what it is going to lead to what it does. So if we look back at the pencil, again, it's really important that like the pencil's not too wide because then it can't fit between your fingers. It's important that the pencil is made out of graphite and not quartz, because if it was made out of quartz, it would not write. So structure, anatomy will always lead to function or the physiology. You can't have physiology without anatomy. All right. Last couple of things here. The levels of organization. Hopefully, you recall some of this from biology because we also study it in your biology classes. So, the very basic unit of organization is chemicals. So that's why we study like chemistry and biochemistry and organic chemistry, is because everything's made out of chemicals or made out of the elements of the periodic table. When we take the human body, you are still starting at that very, very, very basic chemical level with the atoms, and you bring the atoms and you put them together and it makes molecules. You bring the molecules together, it makes the macromolecules. So we're still starting at this very, very basic unit, and then we start building up. So once you have macromolecules, so you have all these macromolecules, which we studied those in biology, proteins, carbs, lipids, and nucleic acids. Once you put those together, you get the organelles, and those are the organelles of the cell. So now we have these different jobs going on inside the cell. You take a bunch of those organelles and you put them together and you get the cell. This is the thing that's actually living. Then you take a bunch of cells and you put them together and they all have kind of a common purpose. Now they're tissues. Take a bunch of tissues, put them together. They all kind of have a common purpose. Now it's an organ. Take a bunch of organs, put them together. They all have a common function. Now it's the organ system. You take a bunch of organ systems, put them together. It's the organism. So we're starting off very, very, very small. So we can add that here. Very, very, very small. And we work our way up to the organism, which is going to be the biggest part. Okay. So that is going to be important that you know those levels of organization. So again, starting at the very, very, very small and working our way up to the very, very, very big. So if we look at that, whoops, let's go ahead and erase that. So that's what this image here is showing you, or showing, is that we have the levels of organization. So we start with an atom. Atoms build up, they make the molecules. Molecules build up, they make the macromolecules. And a reminder, those are lipids, proteins, carbohydrates, and nucleic acids. You take a bunch of the macromolecules, put them together. Technically, you get an organelle first, and then the organelles make the cell. A bunch of cells, so you can see in this picture of the tissue, it's a bunch of these kind of N or H, kind of sideways N or H looking cells. There's a bunch of them all together here. So that makes a tissue. The tissues, put them together. This particular tissue would be cardiomuscular tissue. So that's this part right here. But this organ is made up of many different tissues. So you have cardiomuscular tissue, you've got adipose tissue, you've got membranes within it. So you have a lot of tissues, but that makes an organ. This organ makes up one part of this organ system. This is the cardiovascular and circulatory systems. And then you take the organ system and put those together with a bunch of other organ systems, and you get the organism. So the human body is made up of 11 smaller organ systems. So those include things like the cardiovascular, respiratory, nervous systems, endocrine system, digestive system, urinary system. And we're going to study all of those this year. All right. Well, that is the end of Ed Puzzle number 1. So hopefully as you were going, you filled out your notes. If you didn't, please feel free to access the notes and get them downloaded. Otherwise, in class, we're going to do some activities over this information. And if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll see you in class.